Hello again, everybody. My name is John D Healy. I do a podcast. I've been doing podcasts now for over 4 years. Podcast name is Good to Talk, and I always have interesting guests on. Today will be no exception. Got into podcasting because I produced this book for my friend Stoney McGurn. Stoney was born in 1941, and people do ask me, is he still alive? He's very much alive. The book is on Amazon, and it's also on audio. My sponsors are Liffey Movers, a moving company here in New York City, and they've been around longer than Jeopardy, and they're regarded as one of the best moving companies in all of New York City. When it comes to moving, I always say let Liffey do the lifting. And yes, people ask me, do they move pianos? Move pianos? We play pianos. Shout out to the Irish Examiner USA, a newspaper here in New York. Lee McCarthy is the editor, owner, I guess. Paddy is always out and about. Like myself, he meets interesting people. And it's a great paper this time of year for all the events and parties and different functions coming up. So check it out. You get it online, irishexaminerusa.com. A shout out to LTV Mechanical. They are a HVAC company, that means heating and cooling. And recently I met Tobias Burke, and he was giving me advice how to adjust my thermometer, because if it gets too cold, you want to be hot. And if you're too hot, you want to be cold. So I'm going to have a guest today. Her name is Eimear Ní Bhraonáin. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. Eimear Ní Bhraonáin. She is a journalist. She worked in radio like myself, podcasting and broadcasting. And she has written a book about famous name DJ Carey, and the book is called, let me put up again for you, the book is called The Dodger. Let me tell you a little bit about Eimear Ní Bhraonáin before I introduce her in person or on my journalist. So Eimear Ní Bhraonáin is a journalist deeply rooted in her community. She worked in the Midlands and South East, correspondent for the Irish Independent, another Irish paper. In more recent years, she spent a decade working as a local broadcaster with Kilkenny, Carlow local radio. And since then, Eimear has been running her own communications firm, very good. And she has spent a lot of time working on this book called The Dodger. DJ Carey, if you don't know him, he is a superhero when it comes to hurling in Ireland, 5-time All-Ireland winner. I'm going to get Eimear to give us the background and then the book and his background. Sad to say that DJ is now spending time in jail. Eimear Ní Bhraonáin, good morning, good afternoon, wherever we are. Welcome to It's Good to Talk. Let's talk about you and where you started yourself, and then your research into this book about DJ Carey. Please.
Good morning, John.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for the kind invite. I'm Eimear Ní Bhraonáin. I'm from Carlow originally, born and bred in Carlow town, but I've spent a huge chunk of my life working in Kilkenny as a journalist. So while I worked nationally for the Irish Independent as a regional journalist for a number of years, I always found the local story the most captivating for me. So I'm very much part of my community. I love all things about Irish culture and heritage. I'm a Gaeilgeoir, and I had a huge amount of mass for DJ Carey, like an awful lot of people. He was a superstar in Ireland. So young people talk to me now, even my own daughter, John, and they say, who is DJ? The meme culture now, they just see him with a phone charger attached to his nose, that unfortunate photograph that has done the rounds about DJ Carey. But before all of this broke, he didn't need a surname in Ireland. He was simply DJ. And with cancel culture now, sometimes people tend to want to erase the truth. And the truth of the matter is, as I see it, there are two DJ Careys. There is DJ Carey, the hurler, the greatest maybe hurler, some would say, of his generation. And then, unfortunately, what's transpired in recent years, we now know there was another DJ, there was another side to him, and that is DJ the con man. And that was there for a very long time, but it's painful, and it's painful sometimes to see what's right under your nose.
Well, that's very true, and you explained it very well, because, I mean, it's like any superhero, and they have their followers, and they cannot accept that they're telling lies or that they're deceitful. It happens all over the world. It happens with a lot of superstars, and the loyal, strong followers will not accept that they are a con artist, that they lie. But the DJ case is, I think, extremely sad, because, as you said, there are a lot of young people were followers, and he was an icon of sport. Now, let me give a brief background to sport for my American listeners. The GAA, the Gaelic Athletic Association, was founded in 1884, and people that play the sport, they don't get any wage or they don't get a salary. They get nothing. They play it out of love. If we took the same player like DJ and he was playing for Man United or Liverpool, playing for soccer, he'd be making millions and millions of pounds and euros and whatever the case may be. So in that regard, no. And while I'm on it, the GAA and the Catholic Church have been in bed together since the foundation of the state. And a lot of DJ's problems go back to greed. And when it comes to greed, if there was an award for greed, the GAA themselves and the Catholic Church would be sharing the trophy. So let's go back to you, Ní Bhraonáin, and let's talk about your research. Let's talk about DJ. When did this illness, I'll call it, get into his system that he has to lie? He pretended he had cancer and he borrowed money from decent, good people that were completely conned. So back to you, Niamh.
John, it's a long con. So as I say, there was always maybe signs of deceit there and of a lack of truthfulness there, but there was also so many good things, and the feeling that DJ Carey gave so many people. You're right to bring the money into it as well. The fact that it's an amateur sport, and that you're talking about guys that train several nights a week, that give so much to their counties. And many of us watching these guys, accessible heroes, you might say, because we can see them in our communities. But we would think that there is an inherent decency in a person that gives so much of their time. So that's what makes this fraud all the more complicated. DJ, the first mention of the word cancer, I had to go way back and I had to start reading the archives. And I'd remembered some of the stories, even as a younger journalist. Thinking back, things are different with the knowledge we have now. But at the time, DJ Carey, say in the early noughties, he had an excellent reputation. So even around the time when I was working for the Irish Independent during the Celtic Tiger years, he was in a relationship with a woman called Sarah Neuman, and she was a millionaire. It was a fantastic story. She had a rags to riches type story. She sold a company in the .com kind of boom, a hotel bookings business, and she made millions of euro. And the two of them bought properties in exclusive golf resorts in Ireland, in the K Club in Mount Juliet. She had a chalet in the Swiss Alps named after her daughter, Chalet Grace, and she also had a property on Alma Road in Monkstown, very wealthy suburb in Dublin. So DJ kind of was almost, you might say, he rocketed into a different stratosphere from the simple pleasures of life in a village in Gorn, County Kilkenny, where he had been married to a local Kilkenny woman and had two lovely children. Life changed a lot for him. His marriage broke down. He got into some difficulty in business. He met Sarah. They were the poster couple really for the Celtic Tiger. But there were times when DJ wasn't as straightforward as we thought. And I now know from sources I have, when I went to places like the K Club and I sat down with people and asked them about DJ, they said there were times during the period when he was living there with Sarah that he would talk a lot about his health, that he would say things and say not to tell Sarah about them, but he'd point marks on the bottom of his head. He'd talk about brain tumours, brain aneurysms, this kind of thing, say that he was going abroad to the US for treatment, and sometimes he would look for money. Not always, but he certainly was peddling the story for a very long time. And there's further evidence in the archives of the story being around for more than 20 years. The first mention of the word cancer or terminal illness, terminal cancer, and DJ Carey in the one sentence is as far back as 2003. Sports journalist Dennis Walsh asked DJ Carey why he was being persecuted by these rumours, why people would say such a thing about him in 2003, that a rumour had swept the southern half of the country that DJ Carey was dying of cancer. And DJ himself answered that question by saying that he was suffering from stomach pains, that he was in the waiting room in the hospital in Waterford, sitting outside the oncology ward, and from there he reckoned the cancer rumour was born. But in the book I asked the question, is this where he got the idea about cancer? Because certainly from that point on, he appeared to talk a lot about his health, to research his health, to tell stories about his health, but his main motivation was not to seek an operation. Maybe somebody with a serious condition, feigning illness, would want all the treatments. DJ Carey's primary motivation was money. So it had all the hallmarks of textbook fraud or con man stuff, just that he was very good at it.
Well, Emer, you explained that extremely well, but there have been situations of, say, you take someone like Steve Jobs, like when he was diagnosed with cancer, and he died obviously from cancer, but he went with alternative medicine, stuff like that. So, you can see maybe a little bit of that, not crazy. But again, back to the GAA, where were the people around him that should have been around him? I know he married up, as you say. Like, where was this millionaire wife that had all these business and hotels and chalets, and that surely the first person you would confide in if you had a terminal illness is your wife.
Well, they weren't married. They were
weren't
never
married.
married. That was his fiancée. And the relationship broke down in 2012. So he had a first wife, Christine Preston, before they married. Christine O'Keefe was her name before they married, actually. And she remained a loyal friend and supporter to DJ all through the years. He subsequently got into the relationship with the very wealthy woman, Sarah Neuman, who I mentioned.
Yeah.
Sarah herself described in the newspapers how the wedding venue had been picked, the bridesmaid dresses had been picked, but that DJ Carey called time on the relationship. That is what she said in 2012 in an exclusive interview. However, in recent times, she has spoken out again. And she has said that she has given us a different account of what happened. And I'd imagine it would have been very difficult for her in 2012 to speak out about a person of DJ's iconic stature, a person with such a huge reputation. But towards the end of the relationship, she was certainly very concerned about what was going on. And she said, Sarah claimed that she reported these matters to An Garda Síochána. Now, we don't have details of exactly what she complained about, but that he was stealing from her, or certainly that there were issues there. So if we move on then from 2020, after the breakdown of that relationship, the borrowing seems to have become much more frantic. And you're right to ask about the role of the GAA in all of this, because during this period from 2013 on, DJ was very involved in the games. DJ was getting jobs. For instance, he worked with the IT Carlow, now known as the Southeast Technological University, as an ambassador for hurling. He was invited into Brian Cody's setup in Kilkenny in 2020. And at that stage in 2020, there were all the signs for anyone in the inner circle to know that all was not well with DJ Carey.
Well, just reflection on a few months back. I mean, if you'd kept his copybook clean, he could have ran for president and be sitting in Ors and Outron in a free accommodation and getting a good salary and meeting and greeting everybody. But definitely one wheel fell off the wagon, if not two wheels fell off the wagon. Have you any stories of, say, going back maybe when he was a teenager, like from his school days? Did this festation start then? Like, I've come across people similar, but if you give someone €100 or $100 and you know you're never going to get it back, in a way you wish you never get it back, because they are a parasite. And it's happened myself in business life where I've been wrangled out of a lot of money, and you look and you say, my God, what the hell is going on? So what the hell was going on with DJ Carey? Did it start in his teenage years? I mean, he married up. He had loads of money. He is a Nikon superstar. And for God's sake,
he didn't marry up. He never married Sarah Neuman. And he was also pretending to have a lot of money, maybe, and under pressure and in a different world. The K Club set. I spoke to a man that described how the first time he met DJ in the K Club, and this was one of the times when I'd feel sorry for DJ, that he looked like a choir boy type, that his trousers were not tailored properly, that the arms on the jacket were too long for him, that he was wearing a belt that the man said you wouldn't tie your dog up with. And then after he got into the relationship with Sarah, there was a transformation. And all of a sudden he was appearing in the finest Gucci shoes, Gucci belts, and the best of gear. And that he liked the entrapments of wealth, that he was in a terrible mood one day in the bar in the K Club. And somebody asked Sarah, what's wrong with him? And she said, he doesn't want to fly commercial. In other words, he didn't want to queue up the Ryanair desk. He wanted to fly NetJets. So there were different contradictions always there. So in his youth that you refer to, DJ was somebody that we thought was one of us. I mean, he was stacking shelves in Dunnes Stores as a young fella. He had a job there as a teenager. And he was playing hurling for Kilkenny. Even at this stage, we knew he was destined for great things. And he was somebody that people thought was a down-to-earth, hard-working, sincere guy. Unless they were in his very inner circle, that's what the belief would be. The persona and the man, you see, we probably thought the persona was DJ. The Kilkenny People, his local paper, once described him as the Daniel O'Donnell of Irish hurling, the kind of guy you want to bring home to your mammy, the fella that would have the tea and the biscuits. He'd come in and he'd sit down. He had this lovely soft way of speaking. He was relatable, but he also had ideas in his head from a very young age. He wanted to be a businessman. And even some of his former teachers alluded to this and said things to me. He'd get an idea into his head and he didn't always listen to advice. Now, there wasn't a clear one standout mentor in his corner, but there were lots of people who were very good to him. People like his former primary school teacher and principal, John Knox from Goran, a great man who was very, very good to DJ. And John Knox ran, you might say, the nursery for fantastic Kilkenny hurlers, such as Charlie Carter, Pat O'Neill and DJ Carey, 3 of them in the one class in Goran.
That's very interesting. I mean, like, it seems like he had a network of friends around him. It seems like, you know, back to the GA and the Catholic Church, like there was a support network out there if he was able to tap into it. But to me, it seems like he has all the symptoms of mental illness, like bipolar or something. But even so, he's not the only one in the world to have a mental condition. And there's lots of help out there nowadays for people like that. And
well, I'd actually, not sure, John, I'd call it mental illness. Now, I'm a journalist. I'm not a clinical psychologist, but I did interview a forensic clinical psychologist, Dr. Mark Feldman. And in the US, he's very well known. He's written books on medical deception, on Munchausen's. I have details in the book about that. There was no psychiatric report on a mental illness provided to the court, and that opportunity was available to DJ Carey. The expert that talked to me, obviously he didn't examine him firsthand, but he said in cases where people are suffering from a mental illness that might cause them to feign illness, that their primary motivation is very much attention, and that some of the red flags that were there with DJ would suggest it was fraud, it was criminality. Now, that's not to say that there weren't times that there was something going on for him, that perhaps he suffers from something else, maybe a personality disorder. And what kind of thing could that be? It could be something like psychopathy, sociopathy. This is the darkness that we're referring to. And unfortunately, prisons are full of people like DJ Carey that have those personality traits and personality disorders. And in this case, Dr. Feldman suggested that I research deeper into his childhood, that sometimes people suffer a trauma in early life. And this was when I was trying to find an explanation for this kind of behaviour. But ultimately, DJ is the only one who can answer those questions.
Well, I know he was described as a Walter Mitty type, and he does fit that image of somebody with multiple personalities, to say the least. And it's like, you know, he was a superstar. He was an icon. I'm sure he didn't have a problem of scoring with girls and girlfriends more than his wife and more than the one he left at the altar. But he wouldn't be the first man to leave a girl at the altar. There's some famous golfers that have left girlfriends at the altar. My guest today is Eimear Ní Bhraonáin, and she has written the book about DJ Carey. And the book is called The Dodger, and it's available. I just ordered my copy on Amazon, and I should have it soon. I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to call young Jimmy Grady.
I pray you'll be our eyes and watch us where we go, and help us to be wise in times when we don't know. Let this be our prayer when we lose our way. us faith so we'll be safe. So in Yamoin Mondo senza più violenza, un mondo di giustizia di speranza, ognuno riama, ma nel suo vicino, simbolo di pace, di fraternità, la forza che ci dai, è il desiderio che ognuno sento amore intorno dentro sé. Nella mia preghiera quanta fede che need to find a place, guide us with your grace, give us faith so we'll be safe. E la fede che hai che soi noi, sento che ci salverò.
Jimmy, thank you very much. So back to you, Eimear, and back to...
Well done, Jimmy.
Well done, Jimmy. He's right. He has a bright future. I don't think he'll be a hurler, but he'll be a singer. But back to DJ Carey then. You're trying to look for something in his early days, like in his childhood maybe, and you say, he seems to me to have a typical Irish teenage growing up. You know, you go to school, you go to mass, you have nice parents, you have friends, you go dancing, you go to the bar, you meet people, you have girlfriends or whatever, and you go on holidays maybe if you're lucky. And, you know, life is okay. Life is not too bad.
Yeah, in everything with DJ, I find this interesting, John. There are two things that are true. There's always contradictions with him. So on the one hand, to the outside world, he had lovely parents in John and Maura. People said to me, a friendlier house you would not get, that you would be brought in. And that is where DJ got his manners, that he was very good with outsiders and very good at, bringing somebody in for the cup of tea if they arrived at the house, because his brother was a Hurley maker. So they often sold Hurleys from the house.
Interesting.
So that is just one side. But then when you dig deeper and you scratch the surface, and it's uncomfortable because both his parents actually sadly died of cancer.
Oh my God.
So his mother, Maura, died of cancer, and then later, around pandemic times, maybe around 2021, his father, John, passed away also from cancer. And actually, some of the very disturbing details that emerged in court, even that at his father's funeral, DJ approached a cousin to tell him all about his own fictitious cancer and to follow that up with an ask for money. So there's a lot of detail like that would suggest some of the things that I've mentioned to you around the criminality or the dark side of DJ Carey. But in terms of his upbringing, looking in, we thought typical Irish upbringing. You might even think, idyllic, because beautiful Goran village on a sunny day, you won't find somewhere nicer. Farming, rural community. He grew up on a farm. But then there was poverty as well. It was 1970s Ireland when DJ was born. I've no doubt it was tough growing up, that he described little anecdotes that would give me insights. He's my greatest source, listening back to all his interviews, reading his own book as well that he published in 2013, and other interviews he did on television, radio over the years, even describing getting the milk from the churn in the yard, bringing in the hay, different things like that, and that a little child died tragically, a sibling of DJ's, on that farm, and his father never really recovered from that. The little boy was 3 or 4, a brother of DJ's, and actually another brother died tragically. DJ himself said in a cot death at about 6 months old. So certainly growing up there was grief in the household, and I would imagine that had an impact. And I was even watching back as recently as this week his Late Late Show interview, which he did with Pat Kenny in 2003. And during that interview, his mother and father were in the audience, and there was kind of a light-hearted moment where Pat was asking DJ about, he was hurling all the time, obviously, in the house, outside the house, and maybe some windows were broken, and maybe he'd feel the lash of the rubber tube against his legs.
Right.
And that was alluded to a few times, but that wouldn't have been unusual either in rural Ireland in those days. So I don't want to exaggerate that. But certainly there were signs there that while on the one hand life was good, on the other hand there was grief in the household. There was mixed reports about his parents. Some people said lovely people, other people said Maura wore the trousers, that she was quite a dominant figure in DJ's upbringing, and that she would always hand the father out the tenner for his lunch money. And little stories like that would give me some insight into what was going on.
But Eimear, in fairness, like that's almost like half typical of a lot of families in Ireland, where like the mother is kind of the boss in the house, manages the money and so on and so far, and the father brings in the money, and he's a working class man or whatever else, goes to the pub with his few buddies and has a few pints, nothing crazy. And if they have a child like DJ that steps out of line, might get a slap or two, but typical teaching. You said he had good manners, so he didn't pick that up off the ground. He had good manners. Okay, that's an important thing to have, just like it's good to talk. But tell us a little bit more about these little nuances about him. I'm still like trying to find something that'll say that's what happened to him. This story is very much like Goobu, which was a word that was phrased during Hoggistown. I mean, it's grotesque, unbelievable, bizarre, and unprecedented. I don't think we've ever had an Irish icon who has been so high and had fallen so low.
Yeah, there were other things, I suppose, that people would say to me, that he was quite spoiled. He was special from a young age. He was singled out because he was such a good hurler. And the promise was there early on. People were asking from the time he was about 10 or 11, who's the little fella? And he was so speedy, like a bullet. He was so fast. He was able to get away from lads that were much bigger than him. And that's where he got the nickname then when he went on to secondary school, to St. Kieran's College, very famous school in Kilkenny City, a very prestigious institution that has produced great hurlers. He got the nickname the Artful Dodger. The teammates would call him Dodger, or the Dodger. And that was to do with his sidestep, how he could outmaneuver somebody. He was smart, the way he was able to do it. And I suppose that's one of the things or questions that I raise in the book. What if he's been sidestepping us in real life for a very long time? And they're things that I delve into. And it's only really from interviewing people and hearing their stories about him, and back to people in his corner as well as victims of DJ Carey, to try and keep an open mind about this story.
We'll come to that. My guest is Eimear Ní Bhraonáin, and she has written a book about DJ Carey on Sports Hero. And the title of the book is called The Dodger. And that was his nickname apparently when he was growing up, because he was a dodger. Fortunately, he's in prison now, in jail in Ireland, so it'll be probably tough to dodge that one. So back to you, Eimear. Give us some more of the nuggets of your research. It had to be interesting. And was it like you were turning a page every day and discovering something? Wow, I didn't know that about him.
Yeah, there were a lot of revelations, if I'm being honest. There were times when I was taken aback, but I couldn't show that because I was trying to gather information. So there were times when the main response I got from people that were embedded in the games, so we're talking about people involved in hurling and handball and sport, people who knew DJ quite well, that would be reluctant to allow me to publish their names, which I understand actually, because it's very divisive in the community where I live and where I'm from. This story, the betrayal is immense. So people are struggling with it. So the first reaction I got for a while when I called and said, listen, I'm looking into DJ Carey, I'm writing a book about what's happened, and would you meet me or would you talk to me? The men I talked to in particular was always men that would have this reaction. They would have to compose themselves because they would be laughing so loudly for a good minute, or maybe it felt like a minute, maybe it was only seconds, but then they'd say, oh, sure, that fella, Eimear, you know what that fella was like. He was Walter Mitty. He couldn't lie straight in bed. Or they'd say things like he was stupid, he was thick. They'd all sorts of phrases, which I found strange, because the same people would admit that he was brilliant and that they were mad about him. Like, they wouldn't say these things to his face. because even though he would ring them up and ask for money and they didn't believe his health yarns, they actually were reluctant to turn on him or reluctant to say no to him. So they used to warn each other, DJ's on the prowl. Text messages like this would go around, you tip off your mate, DJ's on the prowl, don't give him any money, this kind of thing.
Unbelievable, to say the least. It has kind of similarities to Bishop Eamon Casey when he got Annie Murphy pregnant, and the Catholic Church again, and the devout Catholics couldn't accept it. I was in Kildare at the time. I had a restaurant, Mother Hubbard's, and there was an old woman there, and she just could not accept the fact that Bishop Casey slept with Annie Murphy. And when Bishop Casey came out and says yes, and she's pregnant and she's having my child, or she had my child, and the response to this woman was, well, at least he didn't use condoms. And I thought, well, if he used condoms, he wouldn't be in the situation. So you have the DJ Carey following trying to deny any wrong or any bad. So, like, I'm back to science again. Did the hospitals or the doctors not say, yes, he has cancer, or no, he has no cancer?
Well, this is the thing.
No cancer.
This is the really interesting thing, right? I wrote a front page story about DJ Carey in 2012 about his fears over his blood clots on his brain. Now, he talked very openly about these health issues he was having. So while he never mentioned on the Late Late Show or with Ray D'Arcy when he had a national radio audience in Ireland, never mentioned the C cancer word, he certainly led us to believe as an audience quite brazenly that he was seriously ill and that he didn't want to discuss what that was, but that he was getting treatment in the United States. And that is the story that he even gave on the national airwaves, that he was getting treatment abroad for the guts of a year, he said to Ray D'Arcy in, I think it was 2013. So this is extraordinary. So it was happening in plain sight. These things were being said in plain sight, even though he was careful about the use of the word cancer.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting with what we know now with hindsight. But a couple of things happened that started to really make maybe the con more difficult for DJ. And one of those things was when his sister appeared on primetime and an expose about what was happening in 2022 with her. And those matters are now before the court in Ireland. So we're very restricted with what we can say. But what I can say is that in that moment when she was on national television, the penny dropped with a lot of people and they wondered, what if DJ is at something similar? What if he's the same as his sister? Because he owed them money. And many of the people that he owed money to, maybe they did believe he had cancer. They just thought that maybe he wasn't paying back the money or he was being dishonest about repaying his loans, but they certainly believed he had cancer.
Well, there's similarities again, like to Brian Lenihan, Fianna Fáil minister, many different ministerial posts. And when he had liver cancer, you know, it was out there in the public and the fundraising started, of course, and there a lot of women and men, of course, donated money to help with his treatment. But everyone knew he was coming to America to the Mayo Clinic, which is famous for cancer treatments and all that. But it was out there. And again, you'd imagine someone like DJ Carey, superhero, and if he's coming to America for treatment, people that know it's either Sloan Catering here in New York or at the Mayo Clinic, you'd have an idea. And a good journalist like yourself, and you are a very good journalist, and I commend you for your investigation. It's hard to get journalists that put the time and the effort in to investigate. Like, surely there'd be an update, almost like week by week. He got the treatment, he's comfortable, he'll be okay. Or like one of the Kennedy family recently came out and said she has only a number of months to live. So if you're up there in the profile, something like your health is not private. It's private for ordinary people like you and I and everyone else. And so it should be if you want it that way.
Oh no, in Ireland it's completely different to the United States. You have the benefit of the First Amendment, the freedom of speech. Okay. In Ireland, we have extremely restrictive defamation and contempt laws and laws around privacy. So journalists, we work with a hand tied behind our back. So if DJ Carey said, for instance, to me, he'd like to keep his health matters as private as possible, I would have to respect that.
Great.
And also doctor-patient confidentiality. There is no doctor anywhere in the world that I know of that could responsibly or ethically substantiate that story for you and confirm, in fact, that DJ was, for instance, in the Mayo Clinic. And it's interesting that you mentioned the Mayo Clinic. That was one of the clinics he claimed to be going to, although there were people that had questions about that. So he changed his story a few times. He later said he was actually attending, and he changed his cancer story as well. It evolved over the years. So it moved from brain tumour to, in recent years, he said, multiple myeloma. And he said he was going to the Fred Hutch Cancer Centre in Seattle. And I contacted the Fred Hutch Cancer Centre in Seattle, and I asked them if DJ Carey was a patient there. And as I suggested to you there, they couldn't answer that question because of doctor-patient confidentiality. However, I reworded my question because DJ was telling people that he was going there and his treatment was being paid for because of his elite sporting status, because he was a world handballer, and he claimed that he was entitled to free medical treatment there. Most of the cost was covered because of his elite sporting status and his world handball titles. To the Fred Hutch Cancer Centre in Seattle, I asked them, does such a scheme exist that an elite sportsman would have their treatment covered? And they said no such scheme existed there. So that's how I figured he wasn't there. But also DJ, it only emerged in court, and at this stage the book was finished and had gone to print, but it emerged in court actually that DJ had in the early days given a confession to Gardaí when he admitted he wasn't sick, he didn't have cancer, and in fact he was in good health. He'd never been to America for cancer treatment. He admitted that himself.
Unbelievable. I mean, 10 out of 10 to you for being the journalist that has put the time and effort and research into this. And I'd nearly have to give 10 out of 10 to DJ Carey for Hurling, of course, but the creativity to come up with all this imagination. This is like a movie plot with a beginning, a middle, and no end in sight, because now he doesn't have cancer, and God forbid that he does get cancer. It'll be like, oh no, we don't believe you. You know, it's like incredible.
Well, that actually, in a way, happened to him recently, because in the run-up to his sentencing date, DJ was meeting people, including people I know that he'd run into, because Ireland is small, and people that I know would know I was working on an investigation. I was quite transparent about what I was doing because I wanted people to feel comfortable, and maybe that after he pleaded guilty, they might feel that they could come forward and talk to me. So I got the word out. So a lot of even ex-hurlers, people involved in the GA community would know what I was doing. And they were ringing me, telling me, DJ was in Apple Green or Circle K, wherever, the other day, and he opened his shirt and he showed me the scars from his heart surgery. Oh, Eimear, poor DJ, you have it all wrong. He's very ill with cardiac issues now. He's stayed in a nursing home for a period recovering. The thing is, some of that was true, and the court was told by his defence team that he had genuine health issues. But the problem now for DJ is, and this was always a problem with his lies, there was some truth mixed in, so it makes it very difficult to know and to believe exactly what is going on with him. And even when he was due to be sentenced, remember, after pleading guilty, and also after that admission we heard about to Gardaí, he was to face the court on Wednesday, the 29th of October, and lots of people travelled there, including his victims. One of his victims, a lovely man, a pensioner called Thomas Butler, who came all the way from County Wexford to sit in that court, and there was no sign of DJ Carey. He was due to be sentenced, and suddenly a note was passed around. He had a sick note because he was sitting on a trolley in Portiuncula Hospital, saying that he had chest pain. Maybe he did, but he was looking to be admitted to the hospital. He hadn't actually been admitted. He was in the emergency department, and he was getting tests. Now, the judge adjourned the case, but said that he wanted to see DJ Carey on Friday of that week. And thankfully, DJ Carey did show up on Friday and finally faced his sentence hearing. But in a sense, there was no real contrition there. There was no real... He's still in denial to this day, and there's newspaper reports about that in the Irish papers this week, that he hasn't faced up to his crimes, while there was that brief moment when he admitted to Gardaí when he was caught, but there hasn't been real contrition from him yet.
So he's the definition of a pathological liar, to say the least. But I mean, like, sadly, in the world we live in, when I grew up, my father taught us, shame the devil and tell the truth, so you were afraid to tell a lie. But nowadays it seems it's like it's as common as tea or coffee, like especially with politicians. And here in the United States, every politician that you could think of, first name come into your head, if he opens his mouth, he's telling lies. DJ Carey, I don't see why he had the necessity or the need for all this fraud and all this like con man activities. No
That's the
need.
interesting thing, isn't it? Because, yeah, he could have legitimately, I mean, he had so many opportunities.
Yeah,
Like, John, you know how hard you work and how hard others work, Irish people that go to the United States of America.
absolutely.
DJ had massive contacts in the US. If DJ had reached out, I mean, there were jobs, but he didn't want to work. He didn't want to dedicate himself to a 9 to 5 diligently. And there's so many examples of that. He has a work record. He did work, but
Yeah.
patchy at times. And I've spoken to ex-employers and people he worked with that said he didn't want a desk job. He didn't really know how to work a laptop. He didn't even need to, though. Even in a sales job, people would be delighted to see him
Oh,
because he was the great DJ Carey. He just had to turn up, and he would struggle
yeah.
to do that.
Well, like we said at the beginning of this podcast, it's good to talk. That's my podcast. Like superheroes like DJ Carey, they don't get away from the GA, but if they're up there, you could walk into any car dealership like Toyota or Mercedes or BMW, and they would be happy to have you as a salesperson. The insurance companies, I remember buying my insurance when I was in Mother Hubbard's in Kildare, and I went into the local bank, and the banker said, "Superstar from the Kildare football team, let's shake hands and meet him." And I ended up buying my life policy off him just because he was introduced as a superstar, you know. So like even though they don't get a wage, the opportunities are there. They get a lot of respect. All of those guys they do. But I know respect won't put food on the table. But if he was so creative and so manipulative, he could be sitting in Dáil Éireann today. I'm sure there's bigger con men in Dáil Éireann than DJ Carey sitting in jail.
Well, he had legitimate opportunities and actually had legit income as well. It was extraordinary when I started to look into his finances, because there were times when I thought, wow, he was getting the regular wage from the local education third level institution for being an ambassador for sport for hurling there and for coaching sessions. He was, Dennis O'Brien, the billionaire Irish businessman, was
Yeah,
generously helping him. He got him a gig I would imagine it was Dennis O'Brien that got him this gig, because all roads lead back to Dennis. Topaz, owned by
right,
him, as a brand ambassador. Also an analyst with one of Dennis's media companies, News Talk, Off the Ball.
right.
There were so many gigs that he had that you'd imagine, but it never seemed enough. And this is why the
Yeah.
psychological aspect of the story is interesting. You'd have to ask the question, like an addiction, did he get a con, or did he,
Right.
get a high from conning people?
Yes.
Was there something there? Because obviously he was able to make all this money. You know, he could have made it in a straight way, but that's not the route he opted for.
Well, you said it very well there. I mean, like if you take like Dennis O'Brien and people like that, like with so many connections that, like, and you take any industry at all that someone, even if he's not I mean, oftentimes you see a good soccer player and they decide to make him the manager. He's just a good soccer player. He's not a good manager. But if you take industries like health and wellness and fitness and that, he could be the brand manager easy. You have nothing to do, only stick your photograph on the back of a bus and advertise whatever the latest product of some health vitamin or a tonic or a muscle enhancer. But it now am I getting close to our final questions and answers. If we ever get to the end of the story, where did the money go? Where did all the money go that he did get? Like the rich girlfriend and all of these donors and everyone else. And it's sad to think that
And
you're
his victims included a woman with cancer, a woman with multiple myeloma. She was targeted by DJ Carey. Her husband actually was targeted at the side of a hurling field in Thomastown, County Kilkenny, and he did a beeline for him on a night in 2021 when the juveniles were only back training. It was during COVID. They were fierce excited to see the great DJ Carey. He wasn't interested in them that night. He did a beeline for Ger Kerwin, and his pitch to him was, "I've the same cancer as your wife." Now, subsequently, an ask for $5,000 came, and the Kerwins decided, we have to give it to him. You know, if he's sick, he needs the money, and we have to presume he might not pay that back. And they did give it to him. But all the while, Mag was actually going through cancer treatment herself.
It's sad and sad beyond sadness. I mean, for everybody, the followers, the supporters, they must be still reeling from thinking, I know myself, like when I was conned out of a lot of money by an employee of Allied Irish Banks, you feel bad. You feel, how could you be caught so easily? And it's almost like you don't want to talk about it, you want to deny it. And it does affect the people that are involved, people that gave money. They feel, I'm a bloody
I-
fool. I'm an
That's
idiot. That's how they feel.
I think so, John. I think the humiliation was there, especially for men
Oh,
of a certain age as well. I felt like particularly sorry for older men who adored DJ. They felt
absolutely.
stupid because they didn't tell their wives in a lot of cases. They didn't want to say it to Gardaí. They were absolutely so embarrassed by this that they had been taken in.
Hero. He was their hero, and he could do no wrong. Getting back to the court sentence, and he got what, 5.5 years, 6 years?
Yeah, 5.5 years.
Which seems not much given all the damage that he did, you know. But then in the end, there are people walking around free that have done more damage, like politicians, and I won't name any because there are too many to name. Did the judge like scratch his head, or was it a jury process that said 5.5 years is enough? Or the fact that he was humiliated himself was part of its punishment?
Judge Martin Nolan was very clear in his assessment. It was in front of the judge because DJ pleaded guilty. He avoided trial and he wanted to keep a lid on a lot of the things we've discussed because
Okay.
it would be very uncomfortable for DJ. But it is in the book. A lot of these details are. But the judge, Martin Nolan, said it was the most reprehensible kind of fraud. And he said that DJ's reputation had been totally destroyed and it would be very hard to see a way back for him even after jail. He had taken some mitigation into account, but he had said like a global headline sentence for crimes like these, he was thinking 8 to 10 years maybe. But when
Yeah.
he took all the mitigation into account, he jailed him for 5.5 years. A lot of people in Kilkenny, up until the very last minute, thought DJ was going to walk away from that, thought it
Wow.
would be a suspended sentence.
Wow.
Now, some people knew and had insight into it, but a lot of people didn't. They brushed it off as though it was just a crime against the wealthy or the banks. They didn't realise he targeted pensioners, he targeted the sick, he targeted the vulnerable, the elderly, people who were dying that he visited. There are many people that are not named in this Garda investigation. The people we've hit on it, the humiliation they felt, they will never come forward. So
Never ever.
officially, we're saying the fraud is 400 grand. He paid a small bit back, so he's on the hook for nearly €350,000. But unofficially, this goes much deeper. It involves many more people, and maybe 2 million's not wide off the mark.
Yeah, correct. And then there are people that probably were too embarrassed or too shy to even admit that they gave him 1,000 or 10,000 Kates, maybe.
And people gave cash, and they don't want revenue to be looking into their affairs. And
That's true.
there's all of that as well, you know,
And
realistically.
they want the attention, and they don't want to be associated with the story. It's really and truly a sad story. But I must commend you, Eimear Ní Bhraonáin, for putting the research into it. It's not an easy task to have to be an investigative journalist like yourself and to have it accurate and in-depth as it is. So the book is called The Dodger. It's available, I know, on Amazon because I bought it recently. I'm just waiting
Thanks,
on
John.
delivery. Well, thank you for the effort and thank you for being my guest. So I think we'll leave it there. If my guests have any questions, they can email me at jhfornews@yahoo.com and I can pass the questions on to Eimear Ní Bhraonáin, or I can bring it up on another podcast just to follow up. I did interview and I had another book review a few weeks back with a writer, journalist, Thomas Fitzsimons, and his stories go back to when Donald J. Trump was only 45 years old. And there's some stories there about Donald at the age of 45. But Donald's story goes on to be continued. Indeed, he's 78, 79 years old now. So there's still a few more chapters left in Donald J. Trump. Eimear, thank you again so much for
Thank you.
being my guest and giving us a really insight into The Dodger is the name of the book. And I usually sign off in Irish, my native language. So Shin Scéal, agus Béis Scéal ala go dtí sin, slán abhaile. Eimear, thank you so much, Slán.
Gur míle mágad, slán leat.